Those doors, I'm a fool for your love.
Hello! So we have another Tess Talks IG live tonight with my friend Nick Shelton, who is the founder of Broadsheet. I feel like every Australian would know what Broadsheet is, but if you are from overseas and you don't, it's basically a publication focused around food, music, arts, entertainment, all the good things in all our major cities here. So I'll add Nick in now. Hello. How are ya?
Good. How you doing?
Great. So excited to have you join me on this.
Yeah, thanks. Fun to be here.
I was actually reminiscing today of the first time I picked your brains about how Broadsheet started. We were at Soho House in London catching up for a drink back in the good old days when we were allowed to travel.
Have a drink and you could travel, yeah. I remember that.
Go and enjoy the nightlife and all that. How are you holding up during ISO 2.0?
Pretty good. I mean, I think I'm in a pretty lucky position that work is still really busy. So at least I've got that to focus on. A lot less restaurants and bars and going out, but plenty of Netflix.
Well, everyone's on their digital devices now, so it kind of works in your favor aside from venues being closed. Hey?
Well, yeah. There are lots of people sitting around available to read Broadsheet, which is great.
Totally, that's what you want. Well, I guess, I was fascinated by the story when you told me, so I know everyone will get something out of it. But I guess we should just go back to basics. Like, how on earth did you think of the idea to even begin something like this?
Yeah, so the story was that I was about 22, 23, living in London. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of like doing that Aussie thing that we all do, go and sort of backpack and make coffee in some town overseas after doing some uni. So many of us do.
Yeah.
And I just showed up to this big, exciting city, London, and I found it really hard to get into. Like, it felt really sort of hard to sort of figure out like where to go for a coffee, where to go for a beer, where to take a girl out, where to buy clothes, and it didn't make any sense to me. Like, there's a bit happening in print. Time Out was in print. If I wanted a restaurant review, it was like a weekly, newspaper supplement would sort of tell me something like, Gordon Ramsay's just opened this restaurant you can't afford to go to. And it was when the internet was still, so it was 2006, 7. It's when the internet was just beginning to find its feet. Like, Facebook was around, but it was still sort of like, oh, you want this thing called Facebook. And I just thought it just makes so much sense to have all the information of what's great in a city on a website. Go to and say, where should I go if I'm in this area? What should I do? What's happening here? And sort of how these sort of culture is developing and what are the stories. Anyway, I sort of put that in my head and thought that'd be great, but then sort of forgot about it. I lived in Paris for a while after that, and that only reinforced this desire of wanting to get into the cultural side of a city without having to sort of know someone that had been living there for 15 years. Melbourne, and this was probably 2007, 8. And it was when our food scene was really starting to sort of gather some steam. It was when St. Ali was just starting to make third wave coffee a thing. Rosetta being poured in your flat white, that was news to then. And Lewis and Cutler and Co. And I was finding that nearly every conversation you'd have with someone was about the food scene and like restaurant culture.
So Melbourne.
Totally Melbourne, but like back in those days, it was new for Melbourne. Like, it's so Melbourne now, 10, 12. Back in those days, it was like, holy hell, there's like a whole new conversation happening. And I thought, well, we need some sort of media to cover this and sort of, develop and help support and be a part of this sort of cultural conversation. So go and started it, and it sort of grew pretty organically from there.
So how come at that point, when maybe digital wasn't as big as it is now, that you decided to stay digital and not go into more of a print direction?
Well, I mean, I think digital is the future of media, and even in 2009, 8, 9, it was pretty clear that was the case. All out of print and online. We do a print publication, which we do quarterly. It's great, and that was just a way. Really, it started out as a way of telling people, pick up this piece of printed collateral in your local cafe or bar, but really go online. and the print media became a piece for us. But it's remained a really important part of who we are as a brand.
So what happens then? So you're in Melbourne and you've got this idea, and then what do you do? How do you start?
Well, the first thing I did was basically just went and talked to everyone. I didn't know anything about media, let alone digital media. I didn't know how advertising worked. I just content. So I spent about a year putting together a business plan and sort of teaching myself digital media. So anyone who would have a coffee with me, anyone who'd meet me for an hour. I was 24 at the time, so young person. Some people would go like, fuck off. Other people would say, great, yeah, look, let's chat. I was always considered to be a bit naive, but that's, I think, part of the trick when you're sort of trying to start something out. Is if you knew everything, you wouldn't do it.
If you can keep a bit of naivety the whole way through forever, it kind of works in your favor.
Those things where it's like, if you knew everything now, would you still do it? And you're like, oh, maybe not. It's also hard.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So yeah, I spent about a year kind of trying to figure out like, how does advertising work, and how much do you have to pay people, and what does it like, and how does a P&L work? And after that point, I just thought, all right, I can do this, and I sort of bootstrapped it and started with had a $20,000 loan from the bank. Mm-hmm. I used that to design the website, to work with a design agency to design and build a website, and just sort of started from there, step by step.
And you've always decided to not allow for restaurants to pay, right? So then how did you go about your monetization strategy in the early days?
To start with, it was just keep costs as low as possible and not worry too much about that. It was really about building audiences. So it was a process where, we just build an audience, build a really engaged community. And I was lucky that a few people sort of reached out and said, we love your product, we want to give you, 10 grand here and 5 grand there. And we sort of built up a little bit. Well, I built a little bit. With that sort of little bit of money, I could then afford to hire an editor, a little bit more. I could hire an ad salesperson, and so it became professional, and sort of snowballed from that.
Wow. I find that so inspiring that as well, like, a small loan from the bank, that you didn't go off and attempt to raise any large amounts of investment or anything. You were like, I can just bootstrap this and do it myself.
I think a part of that was me not really knowing, I had confidence in the idea, but I'd never done it before. So it was let's just give it a crack, see what the response is. And if I want to raise a bunch of money and sort of take that next step, I can do that. But about that along the way, I thought, why would I want to give half my business away, or however much you have to give away? But you've got a small business, you end up giving away a lot. I believe in it, and I can just go step by step by step. If I'd raised money, I probably would have gone faster. But now I own the whole thing, and I can make every decision that I want for myself.
And do you think that's allowed to keep the authenticity of it? I know that you guys have such a strong audience who believe in what you publish so much. I mean, there's even that term, the broadsheet effect, whereas if a venue is written about instantly, it's popular. Yeah,
it's I think people do feel the fact that it's got that personal touch. The people who work here at Broadsheet really give a shit. We're passionate, a team of people, and I think how to maintain that when you've got some big corporate overlord, or you're part of a bigger group. It's that spirit.
So how have you remained adaptive to the times? Obviously there's competitors who have come up. The digital world has changed a lot. Obviously you would have had to continually adapt and work through hurdles and all those kinds of things. Yeah,
I think a really important part about being a small independent media business in the last 10 years is being having adaptability built into your DNA. If you have, myself often say all this, or get this back to me. If somebody says to me in the office, when we are allowed in the office, oh, that's not how we do it. We do it differently. That's the worst thing you can say to me. Just do it a certain way. It doesn't mean that's the right way to do it. So every single way we're looking to respond, react. I think we were successful through the COVID period, which is a really difficult time for us to, all the restaurants, all our cities that we cover closed down basically. And so it's how can we be relevant in a period like this? And we just had adaptability baked into our DNA that we were able to say, hey, well, this is what this means. We have, culture applies just as strongly at home. Whether it's through a interview series like this, or it's ordering from a restaurant who's just sort of pivoted to take. It makes sense. We can adapt. And, Facebook is 1,000 times. Instagram has gone from nothing to something. Advertising every 6 months. So we just have to be able to do it. It's just part of the way we think.
And would you call yourself a bit of a perfectionist? I feel like that's the rumor I've heard. Or...
we all have very high standards, but we're also very happy to change our points of view. I think something, the phrase that was described to me, was actually my 2IC at the time, was strong opinions loosely held. So it's having this, like, this is what it's got to be and how we've got to do it, but also if someone has a different point of view or think we can do something differently, then great. So we love it.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got an amazing culture that you've built. You know, it's been really important for you to get the right kind of people in, and
Culture's huge. Yeah.
People that are, I think I read somewhere, people that are smarter than you, because they're the ones who are gonna help grow it, you know.
That person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Totally. And what has like resilience meant to you throughout it? Like, I'm sure there've been times where, you know, running something solely on your own has probably been quite challenging, I would assume, at different points. Has resilience been a big thing for you?
Yeah, especially, I was going to say especially at the beginning when you're doubting yourself a lot, or am I doing this the right way? I've never done this before, how's this going to work? Sometimes you just put your head down and say, I believe in what we're doing, I've got confidence, and just kind of get through it. Ignore all the advice all around you, whatever, or what's happening. But I think if you're not resilient as an entrepreneur, as a sole operator, go very far. Like, you can have I've got a leadership team, senior management team, and I couldn't ask for 5 other more intelligent, thoughtful, clever people. But there's a point where you're the only owner. You're the only person at the end of the day who has a perspective of, if this thing sinks or floats, really just on your shoulders. So you've got to be resilient from that point of view. You've got to be resilient when, like us, we're trying to do new things all the time. You just give it a crack. Yeah.
So if someone was watching this and they were like, I've been thinking about starting my own thing, what would be some advice that you would give to them?
I always look back and think, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. So when I sort of said that I'd spent that year going around talking to people, so often I heard the same story, which is, oh, that's not how digital media works, or it's never going to work, or you're just a kid, you don't know what you're talking about. The way it's meant to work is this, and this. And if we had done that, or if I had taken all that advice along the way, it never would have worked. It's only because actually, I think there's a different way of doing it that I think is going to work. I really believe in that. You've got this vision for it. And just to kind of like think, no, this is going to work, and to challenge the way things are supposed to be done. I think that's where the good ideas come from. That's where innovation comes from. And when you look at your competitors and the other people in the market doing things a certain way, you don't just say, oh, that's the way it's done, we have to go and do it that way. It's like, no, fuck that. Do it our own way. So I think that's the big advice I try to give.
I like it. I couldn't agree more. And you know what? It's interesting, going back to the start, is because when I started Nibletter, where I got the idea from was as well traveling. And obviously we're focused around people with dietaries, but it was the same thing about, when you travel or when you're in a different state or whatever, like, how do you find the gems that are there? And even in your own city, it's easy to get a bit like complacent or just go to the same places. And especially Melbourne, all over Australia, we're so spoiled for choice with so many places. Sometimes it can be hard to know where to go. So something like this, it's just now it's become such a vital part, I think, of just the entertainment and dining out realm in Australia. So it's pretty amazing what you've done.
Yes.
So I feel like, we're both big foodies. We should quickly touch on maybe some of your favorite venues. It's probably a really hard one for you. I don't know how many you'd be able to choose.
I often get this sort of, friends or people around me that ask me, like, you must go to 1,000 different places all the time. And I kind of go, well, I actually end up going to the same places again and again and again, just because I love it.
You're a bit of a North Sider. You're a bit of a North Sider, aren't you? Right.
So the places I go around, I love Marion, I love the Builder's Arms, I love Embler, Carlton Wine Room. If I'm in Sydney, Alberto's, I can't go past, and Icebergs, and I love it all. I really get excited about the places, and I miss them terribly.
I feel like that's why we became friends initially. then we're like, oh yeah, there's more good qualities to you too, not just the food stuff. So I guess the last question I felt like I wanted to end on is, if you could go back in time and tell yourself a piece of advice 10 years ago when you began, what do you think it would be?
I think it's something along the lines of stick to it and believe in the vision. Because when you're just starting out, you kind of picture this thing in your mind that nobody else sees. Again, when you're talking to people, they say, it's not going to work, I don't see it, I don't understand it, oh, that already exists. You know, I'm pretty sure I saw a website that already does that. You know, it's really easy to start sort of doubting yourself. But I think if you just stick to your vision and believe in it, that doesn't mean don't challenge it or don't question it. Always bring in different ideas. But if you kind of stick to your vision and you follow it through and you're true to what you're setting out to do, then I think you sort of set yourself into a pretty good spot.
I love that. Very important piece of advice. I love it. Well, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tess.
You on. And enjoy the rest of your night. Hopefully we'll see you at the end of isolation for a catch-up beverage.
That's good.
Sounds good. Bye.
Right, bye.